He knelt in front of me like I owned him. Maybe I thought I did back then. Maybe I wanted to. Either way, the sight of him crouched there, his hands trembling against my sneakers, burned itself into my memory like a scar I could never rub off. And here's the twist. I told myself it meant nothing. Just another stupid prank. Another way to assert dominance in a high school where cruelty was the only currency that mattered. But deep down, even in that moment, something shifted. Something dangerous. Something I wasn't ready to name. His name was Ethan Carter, the kind of boy people noticed without ever quite understanding why. He wasn't the loudest or the funniest or the most athletic. But there was a fire in his chest. A stubborn pride that refused to bend, no matter how hard life pressed down on him. And me? I was Liam Hayes' quarterback, golden boy, the one who strutted down the halls as if the school belonged to me. From the outside, we couldn't have been more different. He worked at the coffee shop downtown after classes, saving money for college no one thought he could afford. I drove my father's Mustang and pretended the world bent at my fingertips. But that day that humiliating, stupid day our worlds collided in a way I couldn't undo. It started on the football field. Practice had ended. The guys were hanging around, talking trash, shoving each other, chasing after cheap laughs. And there was Ethan, cutting across the field with his backpack slung low, clearly hoping not to be noticed. But I noticed him. I always did. "Hey, Carter," I called, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. He froze, like a deer staring down headlights, then turned slowly. "Yeah." His tone was flat, but his eyes flickered with something more, something like defiance. The guys snickered behind me, waiting for the show, and I gave it to them. I always did. "My laces," I said, jabbing my toe forward. "They're loose." A ripple of laughter passed through the group. Ethan's jaw tightened. He glanced down at my sneakers, then back up at me. For a second, I thought he might walk away, and part of me, some hidden, trembling part, wanted him to. But he didn't. He crouched down, his fingers brushing against the dirt, and began to tie the knot. The field fell quiet. And me? I felt a rush of something I couldn't name. Power, yes. Victory, maybe. But there was also a heat rising in my chest, crawling up my neck, a dangerous awareness that his hands were so close to me, his breath grazing the fabric of my jeans. When he stood, our eyes locked. And in that second, I realized something that terrified me. I wanted him. It would have been easier if that moment had ended there. If he'd walked away, if I'd laughed and forgotten. But life doesn't work like that. Not when the universe is intent on shoving two people together no matter how much they resist. The next day, I saw him at the coffee shop. He was behind the counter, sleeves rolled up, hair falling into his eyes as he scribbled an order on a cup. The line was long, but my chest tightened the moment I spotted him. I told myself I was just thirsty. That was a lie. When it was my turn, he looked up at me, and there it was again, that defiance, that spark that made me feel alive in ways football victories never did. "What can I get you?" he asked, voice clipped, professional. But his hands gripped the marker just a little too tightly. "Whatever you recommend," I said. Smooth, cocky, the way I always was. He raised an eyebrow. "I recommend going somewhere else." The girl behind me snorted. My face burned, but instead of snapping back, I smiled. And God help me, I liked the way his eyes flickered in surprise at that. We danced around each other after that, circling, testing, pushing. I teased him, sometimes cruelly, sometimes playfully. He gave it back just as hard, never afraid to call me out. Somewhere along the way, the line blurred between hatred and fascination, between rivalry and something more. One night, after a game, I found him sitting alone in the bleachers, his backpack beside him, his head tilted toward the stars. The field lights glowed behind him, making his silhouette look almost fragile. "Don't you ever get tired of pretending?" he asked without looking at me. My throat tightened. "Pretending what?" "That you don't feel anything." His voice was low, steady. I should have laughed, should have denied it. But instead, I sat down beside him, closer than I should have, our shoulders brushing. The silence stretched, heavy with everything unsaid. And then, for the first time, I let myself look at him not as the boy I'd humiliated, not as the rival I sparred with, but as the person who saw through me. And I realized I was in trouble. The problem with secrets is they grow heavier the longer you carry them. By the time winter rolled around, mine was crushing me. The sneers of my teammates, the expectations of my father, the whispers in the hallways, they all pressed down until I thought I'd suffocate. But when I was with Ethan, even just for a stolen moment, the weight lifted. Of course, it couldn't last. Nothing good ever does. The breaking point came at a party. Someone had spiked the drinks, music was pounding, and people were stumbling through shadows and laughter. I found Ethan in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, his eyes sharp and sober. "You don't belong here," I told him, half drunk, half scared. He smirked. "Neither do you." And before I could stop myself, before I could think about the consequences, I kissed him. The world tilted. His lips were warm, hesitant, but then he kissed me back, and everything else, the noise, the fear, the lies fell away. For one heartbeat I felt whole. Then the door swung open. Someone gasped, and the world came crashing down. That was how it began. With humiliation, with fire, with a kiss that could have ruined us both. But instead of ending the story, it only lit the fuse. Because love, the kind that terrifies, that consumes, that refuses to be buried, doesn't end in silence. It only gets louder. The silence after that gasp was louder than the music blasting from the living room. My heart hammered against my ribs, my stomach twisting into knots. Ethan froze, lips still brushing mine. His eyes wide with the kind of fear I'd only ever seen in animals about to be hunted. It was Tyler, one of my teammates, standing in the doorway with a plastic cup dangling from his hand. His expression flickered from confusion to shock to cruel delight in the span of 3 seconds. Well, he drawled, his voice carrying through the house. "Look what we've got here." Ethan shoved me back as if I'd burned him. His hands trembled, but his chin was high, his eyes blazing. I wanted to say something, to protect him, to spin the moment into a joke, but my mouth wouldn't work. My teammates had followed Tyler, crowding the doorway, whispers turning into laughter, into taunts. "Hayes, didn't know you swung that way," someone sneered. "Or maybe Carter's just desperate," another added, the words sharp and poisonous. Ethan didn't flinch. He stared at them, then at me, waiting for me to choose. And I, God help me, stayed silent. The next day, the whispers spread like wildfire through the school. By lunch, the whole cafeteria buzzed with it. People glanced at me, at Ethan, at the empty chair where he usually sat. I forced myself to laugh with my teammates, to act like nothing bothered me, but inside I was unraveling. When practice ended that afternoon, I found Ethan waiting near the bleachers, his hands shoved into the pockets of his worn jacket. His face was pale but steady, his voice cutting like glass when he spoke. "Is that all I am to you? A joke? A mistake you want to erase?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. "You couldn't even say a word last night," he continued, his chest rising and falling quickly. "You let them humiliate me. You let them humiliate us." I was scared. I admitted, my voice low. So was I. His eyes burned with tears he refused to let fall. But the difference ISI didn't hide. He turned away before I could stop him, his footsteps crunching against the gravel. I watched him go, every step ripping me apart, and for the first time in my life, I felt powerless. The weeks that followed were a blur of aching silence. Ethan stopped looking at me, stopped acknowledging my existence. He switched shifts at the coffee shop, avoided the hallways where I usually walked. I caught glimpses of him sometimes. His head bent over a notebook, his lips pressed tight as if holding back words he wanted to scream. Meanwhile, the guys on the team never let it go. Every practice was filled with snide comments, every locker room moment laced with cruel jokes. My father noticed, too, his sharp eyes narrowing when he heard the rumors. "You'd better not be one of those boys, Liam," he warned one night at dinner, his fork clinking against his plate. "Football scholarships don't go to queers." I wanted to scream at him, to tell him he didn't know me, didn't understand. But instead, I swallowed the words, choking on my own silence. It wasn't until the winter dance that everything cracked wide open. I hadn't planned on going. But when I heard Ethan was going dragged along by his best friend, apparently I couldn't stay away. The gym was strung with fairy lights, music echoing off the walls, the air thick with perfume and sweat. And there he was, Ethan in a simple black shirt, sleeves rolled up, hair falling into his eyes. He wasn't dressed to impress, but my chest tightened all the same. He looked breathtaking. I hovered at the edge of the crowd, watching him laugh with his friend, watching the way his eyes darted nervously toward the exits, as if counting the minutes until he could leave. I wanted to go to him, wanted to pull him into my arms and whisper that I was sorry, that I'd been a coward, that I couldn't breathe without him. But before I could move, Tyler slid in beside him. My stomach twisted as I watched Tyler lean closer, whisper something into Ethan's ear. Ethan stiffened, his expression darkening, but Tyler only grinned wider. And then before my brain could catch up, Tyler reached out and grabbed Ethan's wrist. Ethan tried to pull away. I snapped. The next thing I knew, I had shoved Tyler hard enough to send his drink flying. The music faltered, the crowd gasped, and all eyes turned toward us. "Don't touch him," I growled, my voice low, dangerous. Tyler blinked, then smirked. "Oh, so you do care. Thought you were too busy pretending he didn't exist." The words hit their mark. The crowd murmured, whispers spreading like fire. Ethan's face flushed, his jaw tight, his eyes darting between us. "Just leave it," Ethan said suddenly, his voice sharp. He yanked his wrist free and shoved past both of us, storming out into the cold night air. For a moment, I stood frozen. Then I chased after him. The parking lot was quiet, the air crisp with winter chill. Ethan stood near the edge, his breath visible in white clouds. He didn't turn when I approached. "Ethan, please," I said, my voice breaking. "Why now?" His words cut through the night like knives. "Why decide to care now when it's too late?" Because I stopped, the truth clawing at my throat. Because I can't stand seeing you with anyone else. Because I was an idiot. Because He turned, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Because you what, Liam? Say it." I took a step closer, my chest aching. "Because I love you." The words hung in the air, fragile and terrifying. Ethan blinked, his lips parting. For a moment, I thought I'd ruined everything, that he'd laugh, or walk away, or tell me I was too late. But instead, he whispered, "Then prove it." That night, under the cold glow of the streetlights, I kissed him again. Not in secret, not in shame, but with everything I had. And this time, he didn't push me away. His hands fisted in my jacket, pulling me closer, his body trembling against mine. The kiss was desperate, raw, the kind of kiss that tasted like both apology and promise. When we finally pulled apart, his forehead rested against mine, his breath shaky. "This doesn't fix everything," he murmured. "I know," I whispered back, "but it's a start." The days that followed weren't easy. If anything, they were harder. The rumors didn't stop. If anything, they grew louder. My teammates looked at me differently. My father's silence became heavier. The world seemed intent on crushing us. But for the first time, I didn't care. Because Ethan was worth it. We stole moments wherever we could, sitting together in the back of the library, sharing coffees at the shop after his shifts, driving out to the edge of town where no one could see us. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. His dreams of leaving this place, my fears of never escaping my father's shadow, the future we were both too scared to imagine but couldn't stop wanting. There were fights, too. Heated, messy, painful fights. Ethan hated feeling like a secret, like he was something I needed to hide. And I hated the way fear still clung to me, whispering that if the world saw us, it would tear us apart. But somehow, every fight ended the same way, with tears, with apologies, with our hands finding each other in the dark, unwilling to let go. One night, we sat in my car overlooking the empty football field. The lights were off, the town quiet. Ethan leaned against the window, his profile lit faintly by the dashboard glow. "Do you ever wonder what happens after this?" he asked softly. "After what?" "High school. This town. Us." His voice cracked on the last word. I reached out, threading my fingers through his. "I don't know. But I know I don't want to imagine it without you." He turned, eyes shining, and for the first time, I saw hope flicker in his gaze. That was when I realized. This wasn't just some reckless crush. This was real. This was love. And I'd burn the whole world down before I let it slip through my fingers again. For a while, it almost felt like happiness. Not the loud, reckless kind you see in movies. Ours was quiet, fragile, like a glass ornament balanced on the edge of a shelf. The smallest nudge could shatter it. But God, it was beautiful. We had our places. The back corner of the library, the old diner 2 towns over where no one knew our names, the ridge overlooking the river where we sat wrapped in silence, pretending the world couldn't reach us there. I lived for those hours, for the way Ethan's laughter softened all the sharp edges inside me, for the way his hand fit into mine like it belonged there all along. But life has a cruel way of reminding you that happiness never comes without a cost. It happened after practice one evening. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, the air heavy with the smell of sweat and cut grass. I was heading toward the locker room when Coach pulled me aside. His jaw was set, his eyes hard. "Hayes," he said, his voice low. "I don't know what the hell's going on with you, but you'd better straighten it out. Fast." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "You know damn well what I mean." His glare pinned me in place. "The rumors, the distraction. Scouts don't want to waste scholarships on boys who can't keep their heads in the game." I opened my mouth to argue, but he cut me off. "Decide what matters more to you, the game or whatever the hell you're doing." He didn't have to say Ethan's name. I heard it anyway, echoing in my chest like a curse. That night, I drove aimlessly through town, my thoughts a tangled mess. The Mustang hummed beneath me, but my mind was back on the field, in the locker room, at the dinner table where my father's voice still thundered about real men and the right kind of son. By the time I pulled up in front of Ethan's house, my hands were shaking. His window glowed faintly, a rectangle of warmth against the dark. I almost left, almost drove away, convincing myself I was protecting him. But then the window slid open, and Ethan leaned out, his hair messy, his face lit with surprise. "Liam? What are you?" I climbed out of the car, my throat thick. "Can we talk?" We sat on his porch, the wood creaking beneath us, the night air sharp and cold. Ethan studied me, concern clouding his eyes. "What's wrong?" I wanted to tell him everything. About Coach, about my father, about the crushing weight of expectation pressing down on me. But the words tangled in my chest. Instead, I said the one thing I thought might save him from being dragged into my storm. "Maybe we should stop." The silence that followed was worse than any shout. Ethan blinked, his jaw slack, as if he hadn't heard me right. "What?" "Thesis. Maybe it's not worth it." The words tasted like poison, but I forced them out. "It's tearing everything apart. The team, my future, your reputation, my reputation." His voice cracked, disbelief giving way to anger. "You think I care about that? You think I'd rather live a lie than be with you?" "Ethan, I just know." He cut in, his chest heaving. "You don't get to do this. Not after everything. Not after you told me you loved me." "I do love you," I snapped, louder than I meant to. My hands trembled as I raked them through my hair. "But maybe loving you isn't enough." Ethan stared at me, his face pale, his eyes shining with unshed tears. Then he stood, his voice flat, final. "Then maybe you don't deserve me." He turned and walked inside, the door clicking shut behind him. And just like that, the fragile glass ornament shattered. The days that followed were worse than anything I'd imagined. Ethan avoided me completely this time, not just in the hallways, but in the town itself. He switched shifts again, stopped going to the diner, disappeared from the places we used to haunt. The empty spaces where he should have been felt like missing pieces of myself. Meanwhile, the pressure doubled down. Coach benched me for a game. My father stopped speaking to me altogether, his disappointment colder than any insult. My teammates snickered behind my back, their words slicing me open in places no one could see. And through it all, the only thing I wanted, the only thing I needed was Ethan. It was late January when the storm broke. I was leaving school when I saw Himothan cornered near the parking lot by Tyler and a couple of his friends. Their voices carried across the asphalt, sharp with cruelty. "Guess he's dumped you, huh?" Tyler sneered, shoving Ethan's shoulder. "Didn't think it'd last. Who'd want to be seen with trash like you?" Ethan didn't flinch, didn't fight back. He just stood there, jaw clenched, eyes burning with fury he refused to show them. Something in me snapped. I stormed across the lot, shoving Tyler so hard he stumbled. "Back off." Tyler smirked. "Or what? You'll kiss him again." The laughter that followed was like nails on glass. My fists tightened, my whole body trembling with rage. But before I could swing, Ethan's voice cut through the chaos. "Don't." I froze. He was staring at me, his expression unreadable. Then, without another word, he grabbed his backpack and walked away, leaving me standing there with Tyler's laughter echoing in my ears. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the weight of everything pressing down until I thought I'd suffocate. My phone buzzed once, twice I ignored it. Probably teammates, probably more jokes, more poison. But then I saw the name. Ethan. My hands shook as I opened the message. "We need to talk. Tomorrow. River Ridge. Midnight." The River Ridge was our place. The only place that ever felt safe. When I got there, the air was biting cold, my breath white in the dark. Ethan was already waiting, his hands shoved in his pockets, his face shadowed by the moonlight. For a long moment we just stood there, the silence stretching. Then he spoke. "I can't keep doing this." His voice was low, steady. "I can't keep being your secret. I can't keep pretending it doesn't break me every time you choose them over me." "I'm not choosing them," I said, desperate. "I'm just scared," he interrupted. The word cut deeper than a blade. "Yes," I admitted, my throat tight. "I'm scared of losing everything, me team, my future, my dad." "And what about me?" His voice cracked, his eyes glistening. "Aren't you scared of losing me?" My chest ached, my lungs burning with everything I couldn't say. Finally, I whispered, "I already lost you." The silence that followed was suffocating. Ethan's face softened, just for a heartbeat, as if he wanted to step forward, to close the distance between us. But then he shook his head, tears spilling down his cheeks. "Goodbye, Liam." And with that, he walked away, leaving me standing on the ridge, my breath torn from me like the night itself had swallowed it. The weeks after were a blur of emptiness. I went through the motion school, practice, home, but everything felt hollow. The field that once felt like home now felt like a cage. The Mustang sat unused in the driveway. Even the laughter of my teammates felt like static in my ears. Everywhere I looked, I saw Ethan. The way he used to smile, the way he used to roll his eyes when I said something cocky, the way his hand used to squeeze mine in the dark. Memories haunted me like ghosts, relentless and merciless. But the worst part, the part that gutted me, was the thought that maybe he was better off without me. It was late February when the letter came. Ethan had been accepted into a college out of state. I overheard it in the hallway, his friend practically glowing with pride as she showed off the acceptance email on her phone. Ethan didn't look at me once as he passed by, but his face was lit with something I hadn't seen in weeks. Hope. And it hit me, hard and brutal. If I didn't fight for him now, I'd lose him forever. The night I found out Ethan was leaving felt like drowning. Every sound around, meth chatter in the hallway, the squeak of sneakers on tile, the slam of locker doors faded into a dull roar. All I could hear was the thundering of my own pulse, a desperate drumbeat that screamed, "Do something." But what? For weeks I had buried myself in silence, in fear, in the suffocating weight of other people's expectations. I had chosen cowardice, and it had cost me the only person who ever made me feel alive. And now he was slipping away. The turning point came at the last home game of the season. The stands were packed, the field lights blazing down like judgment from above. I should have been focused, should have been thinking about touchdowns and scouts and scholarships. But all I could see was Ethan, sitting in the bleachers, his jacket zipped up against the cold, his face unreadable in the crowd. Every play felt meaningless. Every cheer from the stands rang hollow. Because what good was winning if I was losing him? By the final quarter, something inside me cracked. I stood on the sidelines, helmet in hand, sweat stinging my eyes, and realized I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't keep pretending. Not if it meant losing Ethan. When the whistle blew and the game ended, I didn't celebrate. I didn't even shake hands. Instead, I dropped my helmet on the grass and ran straight toward the bleachers, straight toward him. The crowd parted in confusion as I climbed the steps 2 at a time, my chest heaving, my heart threatening to tear itself apart. Ethan, my voice carried over the noise, sharp and desperate. He turned, startled. Liam, what are you? I didn't let him finish. I grabbed his hand, pulled him up from his seat, and before the entire town, before my teammates, my coach, my father, I kissed him. The world erupted. Gasps, shouts, murmurs rippled through the stands like a wave. My teammates stood frozen on the field, mouths open. My father's face in the crowd was stone, unreadable. But none of it mattered, because Ethan kissed me back. His fingers clutched at my jacket, his lips fierce against mine, as if he had been waiting for this moment as desperately as I had. And in that instant, everything else, fear, shame, expectation, fell away. We broke apart, breathless, our foreheads pressed together. His eyes searched mine, still disbelieving. Why now? He whispered. Because I can't lose you, I said, my voice shaking but sure. Because I don't care what they think. Because I love you, Ethan. And I'm not hiding it anymore. The crowd was buzzing, people pointing, whispering. But for once, I didn't feel crushed by it. I felt free. Of course, freedom came with consequences. That night, my father's fury was volcanic. He paced the living room, his voice booming about shame and reputation, about how I had ruined everything. You threw away your future for some boy, he spat. I met his glare, my hands trembling but my voice steady. No, I chose my future, and he's part of it. His face turned red, his fists clenching, but for the first time in my life I didn't back down. The weeks that followed weren't easy. Rumors exploded. Some kids avoided me. Others hurled slurs in the hallway. Coach benched me permanently, and scouts stopped calling. My father barely spoke to me, the silence between us colder than winter. But through it all, Ethan was there. He walked beside me in the hallways, his chin high, his hand brushing against mine in defiance. He met me at the coffee shop after his shifts, pressing quick kisses against my lips before anyone could interrupt. He laughed with me, fought with me, held me through nights when the weight of it all nearly crushed me. And somehow the storm didn't destroy us. It made us stronger. Graduation came with bittersweet finality. The gym was packed with parents and families, kids tossing caps into the air, the smell of summer already in the breeze. I gave my speech as class president, something I'd almost forgotten I was supposed to don for the first time. I spoke from my heart. I talked about fear, about how it rules us, how it chains us, how it convinces us to stay small when we were meant to be more. And then I talked about courage, not the kind you show on a football field, but the kind it takes to stand up for who you are, who you love, even when the world wants to break you for it. When I finished, the gym was silent. Then someone started clapping. Then another. And then the whole place erupted into applause. I found Ethan in the crowd, his eyes shining, and knew I hadn't just been speaking to them. I'd been speaking to him. That summer, we spent every night we could together driving down empty highways, lying in the grass counting stars, making promises we were terrified to believe, but couldn't stop whispering anyway. And when the day came for Ethan to leave for college, I was there at the station, his hand in mine, my chest aching with both pride and fear. I don't want to say goodbye, I admitted, my throat tight. You're not, he said, his smile small but sure. This isn't an ending, Liam. It's just the next part of our story. I kissed him, one last time before the train doors closed, and whispered, "Then I'll be waiting for the next chapter." It's been years since then, but I still remember the first time he knelt to tie my shoes. I thought it was a joke, a moment of humiliation I'd laugh about with my friends. I had no idea it was the beginning of everything, of love, of pain, of growth, of finding the courage to be who I really am. Back then, I thought power meant standing tall while others bent beneath you. Now I know real power is kneeling beside someone, not above them, not below them, but right there with them. And if I could go back, if I could tell that arrogant boy on the football field one thing, it would be this: one day the boy you made kneel will be the one to teach you how to stand. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.